All right, we're back, and it is COMP305. That's Game Programming 1, and it's the Winter 2016 semester, Week 12. Week 12, Part 1. We're near the end. And what I want to do is a couple things today. Is I want to sit down with each of your teams, the people that are physically in the room. People that aren't in the room, too bad for you. Hopefully I'll get to you on Wednesday. Please show up on Wednesday so I can sit down with you and give you your marks. I'd like to try and get that done. And like I said, over this week and next week, I'm going to sit down with everyone as much as I can and give you kind of individual marks. I want to do a little bit of a tutorial today on making it an asset that looks like a door with a little bit of texturing that I'm going to make, right? So we're going to be talking about that a little bit as well. Okay, and the door is going to take us from one scene to the other. It's going to transition us, and we'll talk about how to create a transition, how to do that. So you touch the door, you go to the next scene, you know, kind of thing. There's many things. There's many ways to do that. I'm sure you can figure it out on your own. But let's make the asset happen. Okay, so I've got Blender up, and I'm not going to spend too much time doing this stuff with Blender, but you know, kind of a quick overview of how to do it. I've got Blender up. I got the latest version of Blender just downloaded today, 2.77, right? It's been updated, and let's get the Unity going as well. So again, this is going to take up all kinds of memory for me, right? But why not? And I want to work with that project we've been working on from before called COMP305 Winter 2016 3D Game Demo. That one. That's what I'm going to be working on. So I'll bring that up. So what I really want to do here, remember I kind of had this in Unity. I had the barrel, I had the gun shooting and all that stuff. I could include the mini map. I haven't done that yet in this version, but we could do that. But what I really want to do here in Unity is, here's my little level. I want to be able to transition from this level to another level that I have. So if I look at some of my scenes, I have a few scenes. One of them is, I'm sure there's a scene called, this is scene 3. Remember, scene 2 is kind of this, this other level that connects to this little terrain that I've got here, a little sandbox. I want to make it so that I can go from one level to the other. And I need a transition of some sort, like a door or some kind of device or whatever. Now, I could certainly import an asset that's already been created. Let's see if we can make one pretty quick in Blender and do it for us. That's unique, right? So I want to make kind of like a sci-fi door. I don't know why I thought about this today, but what the hell? Let's try this out. So I'm going to go back in Blender, and I've got this block that I've got. And I've kind of looked up online for a kind of a spaceship door. I kind of searched for spaceship door, right? A space door. And if you look down, further down here, there's this door right here, this one, right? Which is like from dreamstime.com, this one. Now, it's almost flush. It's almost looking flat. There's some issues with it. We'll talk about the issues in a second. But it's just a futuristic metallic door that I want to open. I don't want to, I mean, I could have chosen any one of these other ones, like, for example, this one, right? This isn't bad either. This is kind of a, maybe we'll use this one this time around. The only thing is with it is just from a cuts perspective, if you want the door to open properly, you need to cut it out, right? So you need to actually go through there and then kind of solidify which parts of the door, we create the cuts, and then you can remove this part. For now, we're going to make it because it's a solid door, but I need first to download this door, right, and put it into my favorite program, something like a Fireworks or something like that to play with it. So let's get it. So I'm going to kind of copy it and save image as, and we'll call this, sure, sci-fi door. And we'll put this on the desktop for now, so we have it to work with as a working surface. There we go. Here's our desktop. And what I want to do is I want to open it up with Fireworks. And then now I've got 3 tools open. I got Blender, I got Unity, I got Fireworks, and I'm recording, right? Somehow my computer's still alive. It's 82% of the memory is being used right now, right? Or so it says. So here's my door. The good thing is it looks pretty flat, so I can probably deal with it a little easier. If my door was any kind of perspective, that's bad. The things I'm worried about is some of this. That looks like there's a little bit of texturing. There is really nothing here. It's just an image. So I gotta be careful when I texture this image onto my object, what it's gonna look like. Okay, so let's do this thing. So one thing I wanna do is definitely cut the door in pieces and make it as kind of the piece that I need. I don't need this part down here, but I do need probably up to here if I wanna include my door. into the frame. Then what I want to do is I want to zoom into the area that I want to modify as much as possible. And then when I put this thing down, I want to even zoom in even more. So I kind of want to bring this down so I can see that where the bottom of my door is hitting. So kind of as close to the line as I can. Now there's going to be some areas here that I'm going to have to clean up, but this is the first piece you have to do. So clean up as much of, see, that's too much. Clean up as much as of the door as possible. If you got an image you're working with, a texture, right, and it's someone drew the texture or made it in another program, like let's say Photoshop. This looks like it's like a Photoshop kind of door, right? It could have been actually a 3D door that somebody created an image from too. That's another option. Notice there's a little bit of shine here. That's a problem, right? Because it's going to come out in the actual object that we're going to make. Can I kind of tame this down right to here just to get rid of some of that shine? And again, I'm just choosing. You can choose whatever image you want to modify. I'm just choosing this one because it's one of the ones I think is not so bad. I want to kind of bring it right to these pipes. It looks like these pipes here. So I'm going to try to bring it over here to this as much as possible. It's not bad. And we've got some semblance of an image really quickly. And again, I'm looking for that control point on the left. There it is. So again, all I'm doing is cropping it so that I get rid of the information from the image that I don't need, right? Because I don't need all this stuff, just part of it. There we go. That's probably as good as I want to get it. And double click, right? When I do that, if I pull back out, I just have that piece of the door, right? So I'm going to save that back to the image, file save. And this is the texture that I'm going to use on my object. Now, it's not perfect. I'm not going to go, if I wanted to perfect it, I could seriously go in there and change the way that the object works, right? Here's something to note. I could cut the texture out over here as well, because this part of the texture, this piece right here, is where the door could slide open, right? It looks like it's a sliding door. If you want to make an animation, you'd have to cut this door up into 3 pieces, right? The outer piece, which would be your frame, and then this piece here, which would be the left side of the door, and this piece here would be the right side of the door. And then what you'd want to do is kind of create a little animation using Unity. So when the door opens, when you approach the door, maybe the pieces push in and then kind of come out, slide out, right? So that way you can create that animation. It's actually quite easy to do. But you need those pieces in place. That's one thing you need, right? And you also need some extra area here. If I'm going to push the door in and kind of come out, notice that this is quite wide, right? And it's going to be wider than this piece, right? So it's going to stick out over here, right? If you kind of push this in. So we almost need a corridor with this same kind of background, metallic material if I was going to create a corridor like this, right? I'm not going to. I'm just going to make the door kind of stand out in space right now, right? But this is the one way to do it. Yeah. All right. So here's the thing that I can do just to show you. Now, I could make this a plane, right? So the door is like got no back, right? That's the simple, dumb way to do it. And that's okay, right? I could make it some kind of rectangular prism, so a little bit more thickness to it. Or I could make it a plane with a little bit of thickness. I can make a modifier. I can use a modifier to do that as well, right? So there's a couple of options that I have to make this door functional. The most important thing at the beginning is to make it flat first. And once I've made it flat, then I can add or cut out detail as I see fit if I need to. To make it simple, and we're just going to make, again, just a plane with this object. I want to import this in just like this, right? In fact, I want it the exact same size. So how do I get it the exact same size without too much work, right? Well, in Blender, let's get rid of this cube for a second, right? In Blender, there is an import objects as planes, right? Import images as planes. So if I go import, and you see that it doesn't exist here, right? Because remember that the import options are all inside our preferences, user preferences. So in Blender, you go to user preferences. And if I go to add-ons and I'm clicking import export, right? And if you look down here, there is import, and we want to say images as planes right here. This one, you have to click this on, right? And what this does is it turns on a plugin for your version of Blender. If I save my user settings here, it'll always come up. Let's do that. So, and we can always go back from, kind of to default as well. But for now, let's just leave it as such. So I want to import object or images as planes. So file, if I go to import, now it's down here, images as planes, right? And I can choose the image that I want, which I just kind of modified, which is here, this sci-fi door, right? And once I've got that, I kind of bring it in, right? Now, if you notice, it's there, but we can't see it. And the reason for it is there's two possibilities. One is, first of all, the image is fairly small. We can always scale it up, okay? And the other thing is it's flat because that's the way it brings it in, right? So it kind of brought it in wherever I had my my 3D cursor. Let's just undo that again. Notice my 3D cursor's up here. That's where the image came in. Let's just reset my cursor. I'll press Shift S to reset my cursor to the center, and we'll do that again. So we'll say File, Import, Images as Planes, and I'll choose that one again, right? Import images as planes. There it is. But I can't see it, and the reason why is because I'm looking at it in solid mode, and I need to look at the material mode to see what it looks like. And what I want to do is you know, focus in on there. So I'm kind of just, you know, circle around here so I can see what it looks like. Remember, this is the x-axis, right? And this is the y-axis in this particular way of looking at Blender. And I'm going to kind of zoom in there to see what I can see. And I see that this door is kind of made up like this. I want to rotate this door so that it kind of stands up. And of course, the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to rotate it across the x-axis, right? So I'm going to say R, rotate across the x-axis. So that's the constraint. And I want to go 90 degrees, right? So that's the 90-degree point. And if I rotate now, right, how come I don't see anything? Well, I can see the back, right? Anybody have an idea why I can't see anything? No light. No light, no see, right? Now, I want to make this material, by default, this is a plane, right? So it's just a small plane. And it's a really quick and dirty way of kind of adding some small details to this way. If I look at it, it says it's sci-fi door, right? If I look at the material, it's got a sci-fi door material, right? And specularity has been turned on. I want to turn this stuff off as much as possible. So I want to turn the specularity off here. And I want to use the texture that's kind of combined in here, just like normal, like we would normally texture the door. Here it is, right? I want to turn the texture so that it has some shading and so on. But the first thing I want to do is make it so that the door doesn't require any light. So under shading, under the material, choose shadeless. Now you can see the door doesn't matter. Light doesn't matter about this door, right? So it's just an image, and it's going to give me a perfect image of the door with who cares about light. And this is what we want. We don't want it to kind of shadow because we're working with this object. I want to modify my view, right? So if I go to my front view, this is what I want. And what I also want to do here in Blender is I want to go to view. I want to look at perspective and orthographic, and I want to go to front ortho mode, so it's perfectly flat. So I'm looking at a 2D object right now. I'm going to bring this up to speeds here. So this is the door that I've got brought into Blender. All right, let's do a couple things to it. I want to add some texture to it, so it looks like this door actually looks bumpy, like an actual door, not just a flat image, because it's just too awful this way, right? So I want to add into the geometry piece, right? I want to be careful. I want to, you know, if I add too much geometry, it's going to be too bumpy, right? So, and the way to look at that, of course, is to go back to view, and I'm going to go back to perspective orthographic, and then modify the perspective mode so I can see from the side now, right? So you can see that from the side, it still looks like an image, right? Even though I've turned on this normal map right here, right? In fact, there's no difference. If I go up and down, you see that there's no difference here. This is okay. We're going to make a normal map here in Unity anyway. When we bring it into Unity, right, we're going to bring it in. So, but we want to turn this on to check this out. The other thing we want to turn on, let me go back to that other way of viewing things. So I'm going to go back to View, Front, and I want to go to View, Perspective, and then Numpad 5, right? Bring that a little bit more. That's okay. So I've turned on this mode so I can see if there's any changes that come into play. And the next thing I want to do is I want to turn on the specularity just a little bit. Notice again, there's nothing. Well, of course there's nothing because we've turned on shadeless, right? If I was to go back and I go back to shading, I'll turn off shadeless for a second. Notice now we've got all kinds of stuff going on, right? Oops, front. I meant to go front. So this is where it is. Now I can get some light in here, right? by putting my light source right in front of it, right? So kind of drag my light in front and down so I can see what I'm looking at, right? Now notice again, let me go back to view and I go to, sorry, orthographic or whatever, that you gotta be, we're still not seeing it because what we think is the front is actually the back, right? Because of how because we're looking at it from a perspective mode, an orthographic mode. So there it is. So I brought the light in front, same what we did before, right? Except now we're gonna go back. So we're gonna go view and we're gonna go to ortho mode again, and we're gonna go to front. Okay, so then we're gonna zoom in. And now you can see that there's just too much, there's way too much detail here. Going back to this piece here, so I'm gonna go back to my sci-fi door, and I'm gonna look at the here, the normal, and the intensity is way too high. So let's just turn one off. You can see that takes that away. And if I was to reduce this, right, just a little bit, and again, we want to make it so that it's like 0.15. It's really low in intensity, but a bit of bump. Let's take off that perspective again. And let's look at it from the side now, right? And as you can see, it becomes more realistic in terms of grain on the material and so on. To make it more metallic looking, you want to turn on, this looks kind of plastic looking, see how it looks? And depending on how intense you want to make it, if you reduce some of this intensity, you can make it so that it's more metallic looking. And also the type of shader that we're using, I have to be honest, it's not the best shader to use. And if I go back to here, looks like we're using a Lambert diffuse shader, right? And what I can use is something else, right? Like a Fresnel diffuse shader, which kind of makes it more kind of a softer look. Let's look at the other ones. Here's MinArt. And there's also Toon. That's not right. This is more like a Toon-like effect. If you ever play Borderlands, this is kind of the effect that you get, almost like a cartoonish like look to it, with cartoonish like shadows and so on. Here's OpenNair, right? That's not bad. And there's back to Lambert. So Lambert is the more realistic one. Cook-Tor is the default specular shader, but we want to use Phong in this case. Phong shader is more of a more realistic. You can also add in a ramp from an intensity perspective, right? So you can ramp up the kind of shading it is. Let's go back to this. So we've got a little bit of specularity here. And again, some of this isn't going to be carried over. The more I turn this up, in this particular case, because I've got this normal map associated with it, you get the bumpy graininess of the door that's artificial. It comes from the image that we got. Let's just turn it up a little bit so we can see what it looks like right now. So this is our door, so kind of a flat plane. I'm not going to modify this too much. We're just going to save this as sci-fi door. So File, Save. And it's going to, I'm going to put it right on the desktop again for now, and then I'll drag it into our project. Right, so we'll say call it you know, door, maybe door.blend. There you go, and save the Blender file. All right, so this is the door. How do I use this thing in my project? Right, so I don't need Blender anymore. I could export it. I could go to File, Export, and I could choose FBX, which is a standard file format. But remember we talked about before a couple times that sometimes it's just better just to drag the whole blend file in there and then modify the other stuff as we see it. One thing to definitely do here is see this sci-fi door source, click onto it so that it's included in the blend file. That's one thing to do. The other thing is, the other way to do it is if you go to external data, right? And if you see where it says automatically pack into blend, I want to do that. I want to kind of pack into my blend file everything that I've got from an external data perspective, and let's save it again. So File, Save. The other thing I want to do is my perspective, my size is wrong, right? And for this, I want to click on the, if you look at the actual world settings, so this is my world, notice that my units are none, which means Blender units, and I want to move into metric for Unity, right? I want to kind of make sure that it's in meters as opposed to what it was before, right? Now, it doesn't mean anything for now, and my scale is still going to be 1, but it's important for us to move this into meters before we go into Unity. It's kind of a change we want to make. Save. Once we've done all those things, we can safely close the Blender file, and we can even close the fireworks file. I'm done with this one too. And might as well close this off and just minimize this for now. So we're just working back with this scene. So I want to go from scene 3, here it is. I want to put the door in place. It's going to be like a flat door for now, right? Remember, this door could be layered on top of something else. It's just a plane right now. So the other side of it's going to be invisible, right? And that's okay because you'll be in one part of the in the actual maze here that won't matter, right? So we won't be able to look at it from the other side, right? It'll look like it's an actual object. And remember that the lower amount of polygons you use and the least amount of vertices makes it, you know, easier to render and easier to use. Let's bring it in. So first of all, I want to bring it in as a model, right? Because that's what it is. It's a model. And I've got some models already, right? This AK-47 models and different things I've kind of brought in as things that I've imported. I want to do the same thing. I want to bring in my model and bring it into this. Just got to be careful where it comes in. Here's my maze tile. I did that one with Blender. Let's bring in this other one, right? So again, I can drag and drop. In this case, I want to use the built-in importer. So right-click, and I want to import new asset. And I want to choose my door.blend and click import. What it's going to do is do the import dance that it normally does. Here's my door, right? Okay, my sci-fi door is here, but where's my texture? Need my texture. No texture. It doesn't matter what I do. I mean, one thing I can do is I can bring it in. Let's bring this door in as an asset. So bring it into the scene. There it is. And let's kind of zoom in there to see where it's at. It's in the wall. So let's bring it out. And let's bring it up and bring it over, right? And where the hell is it? How come we can't see it, right? Well, because remember, we talked about this. It all depends on when you bring this door in, it's a plane, which means it only renders from one side, right? It doesn't render from the other side. And this, my friends, is the front of the door on this side. And if I look at the sci-fi door material, you know, the material right now is standard. I want to change this to standard specular setup. With specular setup, I don't have a normal map yet, but I will have one in a second. I have this flat, and it's pretty small. I'm gonna scale this up in a sec, right? But for now, what I want to do is I want to bring in that material. Notice the material. If I go into the door itself, I've got my sci-fi door. There's another object here that I've got, right? And I've got a bit of a clip. I don't have any clips that come with it. And there's a door avatar. So I don't have that either. These are all things for rigging and all that kind of stuff. But it didn't really come with any other information. But what it did come with, is my imported object, is information in the background about how to layer my material. All right, so let's bring in my materials now. Here's my texture. Here's my textures. And I want to bring in this other texture. And again, I'm going to do this the same way. I'm going to right-click. I'm going to import new asset. And I'm going to go to my desktop where I have my sci-fi door asset right here. And click import. It's going to do its thing, and there's my sci-fi door. I have one copy of it. That's nice. But what I want to do is I want to also make another copy for the normal map, right, which is going to be used for my bump, right, to make it more realistic. So I'm going to right-click here, and again, notice that there isn't a duplicate option. But I could press Command or Control-D to duplicate my door, and then rename it. I want to rename this to just add an N to the end. That's usually my convention, like an N underscore N, or just an N on the end of it. Whatever you want, just to kind of signify that it's the normal map. It'll become a normal map in a second when I attach it to this object. So here's my door object, and what I want to do is I want to grab my sci-fi door material and drag it into the albedo portion of the screen. So there it is. My sci-fi door gets a texture. Yay! But there is no normal map associated with it, or specular map. I could do both, right? And for a specular map, I have to make the S instead of an N, and we'll do that in a second too. Actually, let's just do that now. So I'm going to kind of grab my normal map and then duplicate it, and then rename it as with S for specular, right? So we got a specular map, normal map, and so on. Here's my sci-fi. Going back to my door again, I have some slots for all this stuff, right? And let's add that in. So let's add my normal map in here and put it into the normal map slot. There it is. And I'll say fix now. When I fix now, it becomes a normal map, right? So it actually becomes that bit of a bump. And the same thing with my specular map, which is going to go here in the specular slot. And again, you see how it's really shiny. we got to make sure that this all works properly, and I got to adjust all this stuff in a second. All right, let's zoom in here, right, because this is important that we can see what we're dealing with, right? So I'm going to zoom into the door. See how it looks really super metallic now, maybe too much, and lots of bump happening. So I know this all works. Let's get rid of the specular map for a second, right? And one thing to note is even without the specular map, you see that there's too much bump happening right now, right? On one side, of course, because right now, remember, we only have one part of the door working, functional, right? Too much. So how do I reduce that? Well, I want to change my factor by normal map from 1 to something like 0.15, like I had before. Something that's mild, right, compared to what it was before. I don't want it too much. And if I don't look at that as enough, let's see if I can zoom in here so you can see what I'm talking about here. If I don't see that as enough, like that's not too much, we can still kind of angle it up. Notice if I take my mouse and I move it to the left side of the actual value, it becomes a slider, right? Here in Unity, and I can kind of turn it up as I see fit, just to give me a little bit of glow around the edges, so it's not as boring as it was, right? There it is, a bit of glow to make it a little bit more realistic. Now, when I put my specular map on, here's the specularity, right? I mean, again, I can attach my specular, which is just a continuation of what I've got on right now. There it is, really metallic looking. What I want to do is there's two possibilities. One, not use one of these, because remember, if I go back to my specular map here, if I go look to specular, it's a texture. And I have to change this from texture to something else, right? Like a light map, right? Again, just be careful when you do this kind of stuff. If I apply light map to this, it actually makes it really specular, like really changes the way the object looks altogether. We don't want this, so undo. And back to that specular map for a second, and change it back from a light map, to something else. If I make it a normal map, it'll change it back into a normal map. It's not quite a normal map. It's like a texture, but it actually produces something else. If I click advanced, right? Notice that you have all kinds of other options here to change your texture into something else, right? And again, we may choose to use this, may choose not to use this, depending on the effect that we get. Let's go back to normal map for a second. If I can make it a normal map and press apply, right? Now we get a really lined texture. Take a look at what we're getting here. We're going to get a lot of normal going on, where before we didn't have it, and that's right in the specular section, right? So I'm actually adding a normal map into the specularity to make it more bumpy, but maybe too much. Let's take a look at that. You see how you still have that same shininess. That's what I want, but I think the bump is a little bit too much for this door. It looks a little bit too plasticky, right? That we're going to get here. So let's go back to the door for a second, and we'll look at this. And you can see that even at 0.21, it's a lot. Let's go to 0.11, a little bit more, a little bit better from a normal map perspective. All right, still a little bit too much for me. All right, but anyways, let's leave it as is for now, because we don't want to do too much. We're kind of running out of time, because I don't want to spend too much doing this kind of stuff today. I just want to use this door as a way to say, hey, if I go through the door, I go to the next level, right? So I need to adjust it, and what I want to do is change the scale, right? But I want to change the scale all around, and I got to make it so that it makes sense. Like, for example, wherever I want this door to go, it's very important that I go into almost like a 2D mode to see that, right? So it's just, kind of, as I turn around, it's one thing. But what I want to do here in 2D mode is you don't see the door, right? So here's my door. I go F to see it. It's in the wrong direction, because what's happening is, even in 2D mode or 3D mode, you can see that over here, you've got, we're looking at it from this particular angle. If I go from perspective to isometric, this is what I want to see. And it gives me more of a perspective of where we are in the scene, right? An example of this, if I want to look at it from the Y perspective, here's the Y perspective. So I want to drag this, and this is isometric from the top, which is good. It means that I can drag this right to the edge, right? And this is where it's going to appear, right at the bottom edge. Give you more of an idea what this looks like. You can't see it from here, right? Which is okay. That's a good thing. So if I grip it, see the grips are right at the edge, and that's where it's going to be. Let's go back to, you can't see it, but I want to go for perspective mode, and I want to look at it from a different angle now. Let's see if I can keep spinning it around. There we go. So So that's where it's kind of floating in space. So it's really small, like really, really small compared to what it was. And that's the image that I got before. It was pretty small last time. So let's increase the size of that. Now let me ask you the question. Do I need to increase the size from a Z perspective? Careful here, right? Because Z should really be 1, right? Because that's not going to, there's no thickness here. So let's try that. Let's go make this 2, make this 2, right? So that's, is that enough, right? Right? Let's try 3. Is that enough? That looks better, right? So that might be okay if I was going to see it in perspective here. So if I was going to put this kind of lying on the ground, you can see that there's a bit of a door. And let's just try and look at this to see what it looks like. It kind of hugs the door. It's around the same size. You won't see it from the back, right? Because there is no back, right? It's been occluded here. So I want to kind of bring it up so it kind of hugs the floor. This is about 3 is what it looks like. Hey, but that makes sense because remember when we made our maze, we made it 3 high, right? Our original blocks were 1. They're 1 blender unit, right? So that was 1 blender unit high. And now what I've done is I've expanded this thing to make it 3 high. Even if I make this 3 wide, still, because it's a 2D object, a plane, right? Nothing. There's no thickness to it, right? So there is no thickness to this object, right? I've got an animator, and I really don't need it for the door because I'm not going to do any animation for this one. So I got to get rid of it. So I guess remove component. I need this part, but I'm not going to touch it anymore because I think I've done enough. I've got the mesh filter, right, which is the sci-fi door mesh. I could attach this to something else, but we're not going to do that right now either. And here's the mesh renderer where it casts shadows and receives shadows. If maybe I don't want it to receive shadows. If I don't, then I can turn that off. From a materials perspective, it says size 1. Use light probes and reflect, all this kind of stuff. We'll leave it as is for now, just to make sure that there's no other additional changes. And this is where the door is going to appear so far, right? It's not really where I want it, right? In fact, where I really want this thing, because this is where my character appears. Let's play the game, so I'll show you what I'm talking about. Right, so here it is, and there's a door, right? Now, it looks okay. It's not perfect by any means. It looks actually a little fake, right? But the idea is as we move farther away from it, we can see that there's a bit of a door we're going to get to. Now, you can put this on top of a wall too, right? It doesn't really matter because once you come close enough and you go through it, you see that you're through the door. Right? So we don't want that to happen. We want this thing to be somewhere that's layered. Getting hit by something? Damn thing. Okay. That's preventing me from going anywhere. Because I've got the enemy object here. It's going to follow me forever. So I want to make it so that I make it easy for myself. Right? When I put the door, when I paint the door on, right, this door, I want to make it so that this door becomes part of my scene. So here, hiding in the middle of nowhere like this, you can see that there's edges and all that kind of stuff. Wrong. Put it on top of one of these, right? You know, so that makes more sense. So let's just do this, undo. And I want to put it way over here, right? Somewhere where it's going to be like I pass through the door. This is okay, but someplace where there's a block like this that I know I'm going to pass through. Now, my maze isn't really cut out for this work. I'll be honest with you. I didn't make this maze with any kind of planning involved to make this door work. But let's pull this door, right, so that we attach it to something that makes some sense, right? Something like, you know, a block over here or a block over here somewhere, or maybe this block, right? So there we go. And we're gonna rotate the door a little bit as we bring it over, because, you know, just zoom in here so you can see it. We're gonna rotate this block so that it becomes kind of in front of the object, so it looks more realistic. So we have to see, first of all, does it fit here? Definitely doesn't fit on the other side, and I got to make sure that we rotate it across the y-axis. So if I look at rotation here, I'm going to take the y-axis, and if I start rotating it, you can see that it starts moving around that axis. And I want to go to a -90. There it is. Now it's flat across the y-axis. And let's change our perspective so we can see what it looks like, and bring it over with the hand. So this is where our door is going to be. It's kind of on a block. Not perfect by any means, but, you know, at least this way, it's pretty good. And I think I probably couldn't have planned it better. Just a little bit so it's outside of the block, like that. If I was to zoom in on that thing now, and just to show you what I'm talking about, it looks like almost that it's the door that's part of this thing. So it's a way out or a way down maybe. It's some kind of elevator or something like that. So this is where the door should be. Notice that, again, I'm not turning anything else on. If I want also to inspect it before I get in there, I want to see that there's no seams on one side or on the other, right? And I want it to be as centered in this block as possible, which right now it's not. So let's bring it to the middle just a bit so that you see a bit of foundation. It would be nice, it would have been nice to make this door right to the block's edge. And so what I can do is I can probably use, you know, across the one of the axes here, probably across the x-axis. Let's just check this out. And if I go 3.1, maybe it's going to be a little bit skewed, but maybe not enough so that it would make a big difference. There you go. Right, 3.4, I guess. And let's again make sure that it's okay because we don't want the edges sticking out, and you won't see from the side. I just want to make sure that there's no side effects when we look at this thing on one side or the other. Right. So one of you asked me one time, so I want to add additional textures, but I don't want the textures that come with the ones we got from Blender. How do I make it so that there seems to be an exit or some kind of way of doing it? This images planes is another trick that we can use to do this. Now what I want to do is I want to attach a collider right on this object or around this object, so when I touch it, I'm going to the next place. That's what I want to do, right? And I want to do it somewhere in here. So I touch the door, and it, you know, it kind of generates me my next view or whatever, right? How do I do that? So again, what I want to do here on the door itself, I want to add a component. It's got to be connected to somewhere. It can't be like a collider in the middle of nowhere, unless you may have empty objects. But for now, we have an object here where we can attach a collider. And I want to have a physics collider, and I want to make it so it's a box collider. Cool, here's my box collider. Now my box collider, when I look at it, it's like fairly small. And if you notice the size, it doesn't matter how big it is, it's really, really small, right? So I want to kind of make it, so, and there's no Z depth whatsoever. So I want to kind of give it a little bit of Z depth for a second so we can see it, right? And if I zoom in, and I kind of move it to the side, it's hard for you guys to see this, but there is a bit of depth here right now because I've made it so that there's a bit of depth, right? The collider is the size of my plane. And before, there wasn't any depth. It was just hugging my plane. That's why it was 1.41 by 1 by 0.22, right? So I can kind of reduce that a little bit because I don't care to make it so thick. But definitely thicker than the actual material itself. So as you come close to the material, you know, it's there. It's part of the collider. It's a box collider that kind of hits this thing. What's the other kind of collider I could have used? If I go to add physics, I mean, there's other ones too. I could have used a mesh collider, right? Would be one. It's a little bit more expensive than a box collider, but I could have done that. What I want is for this to be a trigger, right? So this is this trigger, and I want it so that way when my object, right, when my character runs into this thing, right, it triggers the effect, right? Now remember, I have in this particular version of the game, my character is spawned, right, by my game controller. This is my game controller, right? And I have a spawn point for this. So my game controller spawns my character. Here's my player, right? And my player is a prefab. Here's my player prefab right here. And my player prefab has a player tag on it, just to remind you guys, right? So that's the player prefab. So what I want to do is I want to create a little script that goes on the door that as soon as it hits it triggers my collision, it takes me to the next level. All right, let's do that. So on my door itself, and again, this is just a standard door. I want to add in a new script, but for me, I want to kind of make my script first. So we're just going to make this a door script, new C# script. We'll call this door script. Once we've got the door script, I want to attach it to the door. So here's my door script, attach it on. There it is. And remember, once I've done this properly, I want to make the door a prefab so I can use this door over and over again, or at least the script I can use again, right? Because it doesn't really matter if it's attached to the door or something else. It could be a, you know, some kind of hole in the ground, right? As soon as my character touches that area, a trigger, right? Then what happens is I teleport or go to the next level. Okay, so here's my door. Let's see how this works. So I want to take this, the door itself, here's my script, and double click on it to bring up MonoDevelop. There it is. All right, so what I want to do here is I want to say something like this. I want to say, I want to bring in the scene manager. So using Unity Engine scene manager, scene management, right? I want to bring that in because without the scene management import statement, this is like an import statement. I don't have access to that class, right? So I want to bring that in. And I want to do something like this. It's going to be public, but I want to say, and it's going to be void. And then we're going to make it so that it's on trigger, enter, right? So on trigger, enter, right? What I want to do is inside here, I want to say something like this. I want to say, and again, I can't remember if it's collision or collider, right? I always run into this problem. Is it collision? Capital collision. And it's another, right? Now, if I'm wrong, right, like for collision, you can always check your API documentation up here. So if I go to on trigger enter for Unity, from a scripting perspective, it'll show you which one it is. It's actually collider, right? So I told you I can't remember which one is collision or collider, right? So it says collider. Otherwise, it'll cause an error, right? So collider. Yes, on collision enter. This is on trigger enter, right? So we use a collider for that. So the collider, what I want to say is if my other .gameObject.compare tag, right, is equal to player, that's what I want to say, right? So if it's the player that you know kind of runs into me, right? Then what I want to do is I want to look at if I type in scene manager load scene, and then the name of the scene, which will be something like scene 2. I don't know if that's the one, but we'll check in a second. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to load the new scene. Right? Save. That's all this thing does. I really don't need a start or update function, and for this one, I'm just going to erase them. Because remember, all we need is this like one little piece of script that does this thing. Right? It's going to be attached to my files. Nothing I'm going to do an update function. I don't have to specify any kind of reference to any kind of body, rigid body controller or anything else. Just this. So if I'm right now, when my player touches this thing, it'll go there. One thing to note is in your build settings, and this is important. If I go to build settings, notice that there's no scenes in the build. Right? What I want to do in my build settings is attach all my scenes in the order that I want them to run. In this particular case, I want to go into, we're in scene 3 right now. Here's scene 3. I want to start scene 3 first for whatever reason. Let's do that. So here's scene 3. And then after scene 3, I want it to go to scene 2. Scene 2 has to be inside this order in order for me to be able to use it. I can have additional scenes in here, but only the scenes that are inside my build are going to be the ones that are created in my build. All right, so I'm going to kind of click that off. So I want to go to scene 2. It's called scene 2, right? So here it is. And notice in my script, I'm also referring to scene 2. So I'm going to say scene manager.load scene, you know, kind of thing. Now this error does not contain a difference for load scene because I put load scene L. Reds are always bad, right? Whenever you do script, and I'm glad I caught this. That needs to be one of those, right? Load scene. And if it's wrong, right? Like notice if I hover over and I kind of hover over this again, it's okay, right? It's red right now because I haven't saved the script and we haven't run it. It'll fix itself in a second. Let's run this thing and see if it works. So, oh man, what's going on? How come I got red? And it says the error that I get is it says scripts door script error unexpected symbol. So I forgot to add a second object here. Code hinting, right? There we go. And now this should take away this error. There we go. And then press play. So we should be able to start playing this scene in full screen mode. Okay, good. So I got my gun. I can fire. I can set my thing. Get 2 points. Run around. Get on this thing. By the way, please don't create games like this, like with barrels. I don't want to see a barrel game for your final project. I don't want to see any of these assets whatsoever. Make your own. So I want to see where oh, hey, look, I see the door, right? So there's my door. I want to get there, and when I get to the next scene, the only way I can do that is if I run into this thing. Oh man, what's going on? How come? Why is this not working? Right? Because it's supposed to detect when I'm colliding with it, right? Let's check and see what's happening. Troubleshooting, right? So what would you do next? So you want to make a door, you made a collider, run into it, and then no working, right? What do you do? Sorry? Debug log. Okay, so we got a debug log. And then what do you do to debug this thing? Because if you look at the collider, it's a trigger, right? That's what I'm looking for. There is no physics material, right? And what I want to do is when I collide with this thing, I go through. Just be careful how big the trigger is. My collider is very thin, right? And sometimes that stops me because the skin, how big my skin is compared to how this thing is. Let's make it, just for testing purposes, let's look at my size of my collider. Let's make this a lot more, a lot bigger. So we're gonna make it kind of stick out a little bit more. So 0.7, let's say 0.1. Not really, but let's try it again. So let's try that. Let's see if it's the collider shape that's the problem. Again, I think it's down here somewhere, right? And let's see if this is the problem. So I go to the door, get on the door, and that's definitely hitting, right? Because even if I go to the right, this way, I'm definitely hitting against this collider here, right? So everything is okay. It's not like I can't get through the door. Actually, now that I'm playing the game, I see that the door is a little bit too grainy for me, for my liking. Probably want to change it and make that less grainy. But for now, we've got to fix this problem. So how do I fix it? So again, I want to go into my scripts, into my door script, and inside here, right? What I want to do is I want to say, what am I colliding with? If I'm colliding with anything, so do something like this: debug.log, and then do something like let's see. It might be, right? But this is a trigger collider, it's not a collider, right? And it doesn't have a rigid body attached to it. Remember this. Remember these things I'm talking about, right? So here's my. So I want to say other dot compare dot game object, right? Dot tag. That's what I want to look at. I want to look at the other game object dot tag and spit it out into the log. I also want to say hit, right? So I want to say something like this: hit with, and whatever the other thing is, if it gets hit at all. So I'll say hit with, and then plus whatever the other tags are that I want to use, right? So do that. Go here and play. Get over there. Walk through the scene, and nothing. Okay. See, it's not colliding with anything. Oh, what happened? Hit with player, and all of a sudden I moved. Right? I'm good. That's exactly how I wanted it to work, right? But whoa, there's like this weird scene here that I've kind of added in, and I can go into the next scene. So it kind of worked, right? But it didn't work the way I expected it to work. Okay, why? Going back to this again, I have to explain this to you again and again. It's due to the shape of my collider, right? We also decided on using a box collider for this thing, right? And I wanted to point it out to you that there's different options for this, right? So let's go back to that door. Let's look at the door itself. It's right here. I was actually there in front of it. And zoom in on it so you can see it. So there's the door. It's hard to kind of see this thing, the collider shape, but if you notice, it actually goes through right here like this. Right? It's almost like it needs to be even bigger, right? So let's just make this like massive. Let's make it so it's like really big. Okay? Now it's important, right? Because if I don't make this the right shape, you won't trigger the trigger effect, right? Now it looks like, I don't know if you guys can see the edges, but it's quite stood out. It's almost like a bit of a, a bit out from the scene, like 0.25 of a unit. It's actually 0.25 meters out, right? That's lots of room, right? 25 centimeters, right, out from the actual wall itself, where you actually can collide. It's too much, in my opinion. But let's just see what happens with this now, right? So we have to optimize to make this work. Is this the problem, right? Oh, stupid ball. Let's get to over here like this, and if I go into it now, I'm into my new scene. That's more effective, right? But I got to be careful, because if I'm too close to my door, right, and if I'm not trying to I'm passing by the door instead of going at the door, my trigger as well. Let's try this out. So see how big it's got to be for it to work. So the trigger works, but the shape of my collider, it's not optimal. Right, so remember also it's embedded in the actual material, which is kind of weird too, which can cause some of the issue, right? So I don't want to go through the door now. I want to kind of go to the side of the door, right? And let's just go to this side here. So I'm hugging the wall, and somehow I'm inside the scene, right? I didn't want that to happen. That's an effect that I don't want to happen, right? Now I need to change the shape of my collider a little bit more narrow this way, right? So it hugs the actual door entrance. This is what I wanted, kind of, but not exactly what I wanted. Also notice that the next scene is a little bit dark. Why is that? Notice that the next scene is a little bit darker than this scene. Why is it doing that? Why is it like, this is a bright scene? Look at that. My bright scene, I'm going to the next scene, it's a dark scene. And if I was to actually look at the other scene, first let's save this scene. If I go to my other scene for a second, here's scene 2, right? And if I focus in on my player, there it is. And if I look around, it's a pretty bright scene. Like, what's going on? If I press this scene to play this scene first, yeah, it's pretty bright. But when I got here the last time, the scene is dark. It's almost like the scene didn't render properly or something, right? Let's go back to the other scene. So there's a couple of issues here that we have to talk about, right? And is it important? Are these issues important for me, you know, for your game? That's something else to notice. All right, so here's my door. Kind of works, but what I want to do is I want to focus in here on the collider. It's kind of sticking out way too much. Let's make this so that it's a 0.2, maybe even 0.15. A little bit less, and it's way too wide. It's got to be more narrow, and this is the X on the X direction. So if you notice, if I hover on the X direction, I can actually reduce it so that it's just in front of the actual door area. Oh. See the line? Even more. So I can make it so that's more reduced. Something like this, and you got to kind of play it by ear, by eye, in this particular case. And also, it's kind of high. I don't want it so that someone, imagine if the person's on top of the roof and teleports, right? I don't want that to happen. So it's got to go down too, right? So kind of move this down. Now, when I do this, when I move it down, it also moves up. So the bottom of it doesn't really hedge with the top. I got to be careful there. What I really want to do, to go back to the Y for a second, just a touch higher. Oop. I'm going to do that now. And here's the Y offset. What I can do is I can offset the center so that it's touching the bottom. Right. It's probably as good as you can get it, right? So this is by eye. Let's see if this works a little better for me when I go through the door. I don't want to pass through it when I go to the side, right? But I definitely want to be able to pass through it when I go to the actual, where am I? Past it, there it is. I want to pass through it this way, but I don't want to pass through it on this way. So if I touch the hug, if I hug the side now, not passing through, see the door, and if I go into it, I'm good. That's kind of a better collider, right? Now the scene is dark, right? The scene is really dark, right? How do I fix that? Look how dark this wall is. The wall is really dark, and I'm here, and by the way, the scene is messed up, right? Because you can see the backs. I should have made the terrain a little bit bigger, you know, or maybe put this in a different position, whatever, but the scene can work. It's just that it's rendering really dark, and I've got no gun. What happened to my gun? Right? It's gone, right? Well, because remember what I'm doing in the first scene, in scene number 1, and which is actually scene 3 in our case, I have a prefab that I'm using called player, and I'm bringing him in, and he's got the gun and all that kind of stuff. I want to bring it into the next scene. I want to generate that prefab at a new spawn point, and that's what I would have to do in the next scene that I'm going to. Not going to do that today, just from a time perspective, but that's what you do to fix it. And the other thing is I would probably want to make this door into a prefab. So we're just going to call this sci-fi door, so we know what it is. And I want to make this sci-fi door into a prefab that I'm going to pull into my custom prefabs over here. Because I've got everything working the way I like to, right? So I'm going to kind of put it right in here, like this. There it is. Okay, now, how do I deal with this light? So I've got an area light that's in here. I got one of those that I kind of brought in. Right? I've got a directional light as well. But somehow my light becomes dimmer when I move from one scene to the other, right? And we're going to adjust that, not today, but we'll adjust that on Wednesday, just from a time perspective, how to fix the lighting, right? Because you're moving from one scene to the next. You want to maintain the same light, right? Otherwise it looks like you're moving from dark to dark to dark. Actually, keep getting darker, right? But for now, this is working. And I want to bring the door back. I want to take this same door and put it into my other scene. So when I see this door on the other scene, I can come back to this one, right? So think about a door. If you make a house, you make a door on the outside, right? That shows the house. The house is actually just a structure. It's a block, right? Try and get in from the windows on the outside, nothing. You go from the front door, boom, you're inside the house, right? And you can make noises like that. Some kind of door. You can make a little animation that plays before you go to the next door inside, right? Like a little door opening animation that you see in some of those 3D games. That's just like, you know, like actually like an animation that just does one of these with a clicking sound or something to give you feedback that you're moving from one place to the other. That's not a big deal, guys, right? So let's do this door, and I want to bring it in. I'm going to save the scene, and I'm going to go back into my new scene really quickly, and then we'll stop. Here's my scene 2. And what I want to do in scene 2 is I want this door, I want to teleport or move from one scene to the other here into where this is supposed to be in this little other tile that I made, right? But I want to be able to move back, right? So how do I do that? Well, I'm here. Not really great, eh? It's not really a great tile to move from, right? So let's rotate the tile a little bit so it makes more sense. I'll come out from this side, right? Like here. So I'm going to kind of take the tile, click onto it, and we'll rotate it maybe 180 degrees. So let's just do 180. 180. Okay, how about 90? 0. There we go. That's what I wanted. 0. And I want we got to be careful where the character comes in because the player is going to be here. I want the player to appear here. So I'm going to kind of zoom in on the player to make sure that he's just in front of the door, right? And again, I would probably use another game controller with a spawn point that's right here, right? And I want to draw the door right back up here, right? Because this is the door that I have. I already have a door prefab. Here's my sci-fi door, which I want to bring into the scene, right? In here. That's where I want the door to be. If that makes sense. So there's the door with the controller and all that. Notice that there's the whole mesh collider and everything else. I need to rotate this door, a different way. So again, if you notice, I want to rotate it this way to the 0. There's my door, right? Now there's a bit of a problem, right? It's a little bit too wide and too big for this thing, right? And the reason why is because, again, no planning. I didn't bring this up. There's my box collider. You can see the box collider sticking out from the door itself. I could have used different kinds of colliders. But what I want to do is I want to bring this door in so it kind of hugs this object here, right? Not quite in it, but just out of it. And I want to break it over, and I want to bring it down, just align it with the actual block, right? And I'm doing that by eye. What I want to do is I want to zoom in as much as I can so you can see this door. Now the door that I've picked is very generic. You could have picked doors that kind of say which level you're going to. I'm just checking the edges of the level so that I can see a place where it's kind of going in and out. Now there's a bit of an issue on this side. So I'm going to just drag it just a touch. It's not perfect. Sorry, guys. There we go. And again, I'm trying to drag it around so that's not right. Yeah, it needs a little bit more adjusting. I'm not going to adjust it right now, but you would have to play with the door size again. Same thing. You have to go up here and where it says 3.4 the scale, go up to a different scale size to make sure that you can't see the edges if you want to be perfect. We're not perfect. All right, so I'm going to save the scene. I got this new door. Remember, I didn't do any more scripting, right? How do I get it from one scene? We are in this scene, right? I got the door, but I want to change the script for the door. That's something different. Well, the thing is, this script, which is the sci-fi door, is attached to something called door script, right? And this is door script to level 2. I want to go door script to level 1, or whatever it is, level 3, to do that. So I'm going to go back into my scripts. I want to make a copy of the script, right? So I'm going to kind of duplicate the script. So Control D. Here's my door script, and then we'll say door script to level 3. That's where it's going, or scene 3. We'll say it. Sorry, scene 3, because that's where it's going. Scene 3, and this one I'll rename door script to scene 2, just so we know what it is. Sorry, scene 2, right? But now we have a problem, right? My door script scene 2 and door script scene 3 needs to be modified. So if I go to door script scene 2, it says door script. That's not going to work. I need to actually change this to scene 2. That's why it says scene 2. Notice the problem goes away. And the same thing goes door script scene 3. When I rename a script, I got to change the class inside the script, right? So door script scene 3 doesn't make any sense. Got to be door script scene 3, right? So this one's going to go to scene 3, I'm going to save that scene. So it's going to load scene 3, right? Like that. That's all the change I'm going to make, right? So here's my, I got 2 scripts. One, the door script scene 2. The other one is door script scene 3. So I can go back and forth, right? And if I go back to the sci-fi door that I got, right, I can rename this door so it's not generic anymore. Sci-fi door to scene 3, so I know what it is, right? Save the scene, and I attach a different script to it. So instead of, I can just use the script, just change this up. So remove, and drag and drop scene 3 into there. Now it's not part of my, it's not part of my prefab anymore. It looks the same. It's got the same collider, which is what I wanted, which is good. Save the scene. And I'm going to go back to the original scene, which is scene 3 in this particular case. So let's go back to scene 3. I got to change this up a little bit because now my C3 has a sci-fi door, which I'm going to rename sci-fi door to scene 2, right? And notice that it has door script scene 2 attached to it already because that's the prefab. That's what I've changed. Let's run this thing and see what happens. All right, so I'm here. Oh, look at that thing. Almost tried to get me. And I'm going to go over here, run to the next scene, and then I'm here. And if I look back, I'm like, oh man, why can't I see this? It's here, actually. No light, right? So if I actually go back, I'm back into the other scene again, and I'm back to where I started. Oh man, but look, the light's down again. Right? And got some weird effects going on. Look. You won't see here, but sometimes it doesn't work, and I got to go all the way back over here, right? And it's really dark, right? So you know how to get from scene to scene, no problem. I can go back to this one. Here I am again, right? And I can go back and forth as much as I want, right? Can't see the light though. I can't see the scene. There it is, right? And I always start at the same place where I was, and this is not, it doesn't make any sense that I would start back here, right? I want to start back where I came from, and that's another piece of script you can put in play to say start up. Go back to the scene. When I go to the scene, I use my game controller just to respawn it. If I've come from another scene, my game controller can detect which scene I've come from. We can do that too. And when we know when that happens, by passing information from one scene to the other, it'll change some of the effects of the scene. Questions around moving from scene to scene using different doors. Again, you know, you can use your imagination as much as you want to make this happen for it to be effective. But this is the kind of the mechanic that I'm showing you here is the right mechanic. What you need to figure out is, we're going to talk about this next day, is when I move from scene to scene, how does this work so that it you know, it's more realistic. Okay, that's it for me for today.